North Korea U.S. summit exactly 2 weeks away. President Trump hails the teamwork between Seoul and Washington to coax North Korea back to talks. America's top diplomat also expresses his optimism for a successful summit. Stump up more. President Trump demands a further hike in South Korea's share of the cost of stationing American troops on the peninsula. His call comes just a day after Seoul revealed it'll up its contribution by an extra 8.2% this year. Plus, more grim news for job seekers in South Korea. The overall unemployment rate for January comes in at 4.5%, a level not seen since the height of the aftermath of the global financial crisis. Let's start today, though, in everything to do in regards to the ongoing diplomacy with North Korea, with the big summit coming up. U.S. President Donald Trump has revealed he's cooperating with his South Korean counterpart Moon Jae-in, and the situation with North Korea is, quote, coming along. Speaking at a cabinet meeting at the White House on Tuesday, Trump explained Seoul and Washington enjoy a great relationship. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in Slovakia on Tuesday that substantial progress will be made during this month's summit between Washington and Pyongyang in Hanoi. He also expressed his hope that progress would be made on all of the pillars the two sides agreed upon in Singapore in June of last year, namely security and peace on the peninsula, the North's denuclearization, as well as creating the conditions for a bright future for the people of North Korea. And the agenda for this month's huge summit in Hanoi has reportedly been set now. This is according to the Trump administration's point man on North Korea. However, specific details remain unclear at this point, and Washington admits a lot of negotiations still have to be done by working level officials before President Trump and Kim Jong-un meet for a second time at the end of February. EG1 with the details.
North Korea and the U.S. were able to set their agenda for the upcoming summit between their leaders, and the next stop of their negotiations is set to start in the next working-level meeting. This is according to U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun, who met with South Korean National Assembly Speaker Moon Hee-sang and a delegation of South Korean lawmakers during their sit-down with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan in Washington on Monday. Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency reported, citing the delegates, that Biegun said Pyongyang and Washington discussed more than 12 items for the summit agenda during their working-level meeting last week, with both sides having the chance to fully explain what they wanted. He added that the two sides will look to narrow their differences starting from their next round of talks. The U.S. has been demanding that North Korea take concrete denuclearization steps, including providing an inventory of its nuclear and missile programs, while the North has been asking for sanctions relief and a declaration to end the 70-year-long Korean War. South Korea's presidential office had said the two sides will resume their talks in a third country in Asia next week. With only 2 weeks left until the second Pyongyang-Washington summit, the nuclear envoy said it'll be difficult to resolve all the obstacles ahead. But he was hopeful in saying that it's still possible if they can agree on the timeline for denuclearization. Biegun allegedly said his talks with his new counterpart Kim Hyok-chol, U.S. Affairs of the State Affairs Commission of North Korea, were productive and the atmosphere was good. He then added that it's a long road to normalize ties with North Korea, signing a peace treaty and establishing the foundation for economic prosperity on the Korean peninsula, but that the U.S. has chosen to work towards that, and that he hopes North Korea makes the right choice. Biegun also reportedly stressed how this whole Washington working group has helped the situation and is maintaining the balance between fast-progressing inter-Korean exchanges and the denuclearization talks. Meanwhile, Moon Hee-sang and the South Korean lawmakers will meet with U.S. senators before leaving Washington on Friday. 이지원, Arirang News.
Now, a top U.S. military commander is expressing optimism ahead of the second summit between the leaders of North Korea and the U.S. In a written statement to the Senate Armed Services Committee, Admiral Philip Davidson, chief of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, said he was happy with the pre-summit preparations, noting some of the positive steps North Korea has taken so far. However, he noted it is unlikely the regime will completely denuclearize. In a statement submitted by the commander of U.S. Forces Korea, General Robert Abrams, it noted that the two allies will continue to conduct military exercises at a level that's not harmful to the ongoing diplomacy they have with North Korea. He said adjustments in the exercise's size, scope, volume and timing is crucial at a time of diplomacy. So, as anticipation builds for what promises to be an extraordinary couple of days in Hanoi, Vietnam's foreign minister and senior diplomats from that Southeast Asian country arrived in North Korea on Tuesday to discuss protocol matters for the second Kim-Trump summit. They're going to have that city on lockdown for a couple of days, of course. Oh Jung-hee tells us more.
Vietnam's foreign minister plus a few other senior diplomats are in North Korea for a 3-day stay to hammer out protocol issues ahead of the North Korean leader's visit to Hanoi later this month. The country's foreign ministry announced through Twitter on Monday that Hanoi's foreign minister Phan Binh Minh is visiting the North from February 12th to 14th at the invitation of the North's foreign minister Ri Yong-ho. The delegation is believed to have arrived in Pyongyang Tuesday afternoon. Among the officials accompanying Minh is the protocol chief of Vietnam's foreign ministry. This suggests that the Vietnamese delegation's main talking point with Pyongyang will be inviting Kim Jong-un for a state visit. Before the venue for the Kim-Trump summit was determined, the Vietnamese government had recommended its capital, Hanoi, partially to have Kim Jong-un as a state guest. It'll be the first time for a North Korean leader to visit Vietnam in over 50 years. The late former North Korean leader Kim Il-sung, who's Kim Jong-un's grandfather, visited Hanoi 2 times in 1958 and 1964. So if a state visit does happen, then there will be a North Korea-Vietnam summit as well, before or after the one with the U.S. Alongside ironing out the details on that front, other matters will likely be on the table, such as the places Kim Jong-un will visit, where he'll stay, and which route he should take. The Vietnamese delegation might also pay a courtesy visit to Kim Jong-un. After this meeting in Pyongyang, the director of North Korea's State Affairs Commission, Kim Chang-sun, could make his way to Hanoi for a look around the venue, just like he did before the Singapore summit. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Now, with the ink barely dry on a 1-year defense cost-sharing deal between Seoul and Washington, President Trump has waded back in on the issue, saying South Korea's financial contribution should be even bigger. Trump's remarks at the White House on Tuesday came just a day after the allies reached an agreement in which Seoul will pay around $924 million this year, up more than 8% from the previous year. He added Seoul's contribution should increase over the next few years, hinting at more negotiations as this week's deal only applies to 2019. Since 1991, South Korea and the U.S. have signed the so-called Special Measures Agreement, where the allies guarantee and support the stationing of some 28,000 American forces on the peninsula by sharing the related costs. A consortium of 6 South Korean defense firms has been selected as the maintenance partner for key parts of U.S. F-35 stealth fighter jets. Seoul's Defense Acquisition Program Administration said Tuesday that the companies will perform maintenance and repair work for the F-35's electronic systems and aircraft injection components. The consortium, labeled Team ROK, includes Hanwha Systems, Korean Air, LIG Next One, and Hyundai Globis. South Korea becomes the 3rd country to have been selected as an F-35 maintenance partner in the Asia-Pacific region after Australia and Japan. A court in the United States has found the world's most infamous drug lord, a man by the name of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, guilty of all 10 charges, federal counts against him. He could very well be going to prison for the rest of his life. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Aram, the man in the international news hot seat there. Aram, what's the latest?
Well, Mark, Tuesday's ruling by a court in New York came after an 11-week trial. Guzman was convicted on numerous counts, including the distribution of cocaine and heroin, illegal firearms possession and money laundering, among many others. He is yet to be sentenced, but it is likely he will face life in prison without the possibility of parole. Guzman's lawyers said they will be appealing the ruling. His trial had been packed with tales of gruesome killings, political payoffs and diverse drug trafficking methods. The U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York hailed the ruling.
This conviction is a victory for the American people who has suffered so long and so much while Guzman made billions pouring poison over our southern border. This conviction is a victory for the Mexican people who have lost more than 100,000 lives in drug-related violence.
El Chapo is the head of the notorious Sinaloa drug cartel in Mexico, which is believed to be the largest supplier of drugs to the United States. Prosecutors said it sent the equivalent of a line of cocaine for every person in America in just 4 drug shipments. The 61-year-old rose from poverty in rural Mexico to become one of the richest men in the world. He consolidated power by paying huge bribes to political heavyweights, including former Mexican presidents. He escaped from a Mexican prison in 2001 in a laundry cart and again in 2015 through a tunnel. He was recaptured in 2016 and was extradited to the United States last year. The U.S. is stepping up pressure on countries that continue to do business with China's telecommunications giant Huawei. Kim Jong-un has more.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who's visiting Eastern Europe, has warned European countries that using Huawei equipment could hurt their relationship with Washington. Speaking in Hungary, the first leg of his 5-nation European tour, Pompeo said the U.S. could scale down certain operations in the country if it continues to do business with Huawei. He also said in Slovakia that the U.S. has an obligation to alert its partners of the risks associated with products made by the Chinese telecommunications giant.
We want to make sure that our friends and allies, our NATO partners, those who are inside of the EU, we want to make sure they're aware of those risks, and that's our task.
The U.S. is increasingly troubled with Huawei's expansion in Europe, where Washington believes the company poses significant information security threats. However, such pressure faces challenges as Eastern European countries like Hungary have no other choice but to continue using Huawei equipment, due mainly to their economic relationship with Beijing. Unsurprisingly, China has slammed Washington's move.
The U.S. behavior is neither just nor moral, which is not the proper manner that a major country is supposed to have.
Yet Beijing said it appreciated Hungary's just and objective stance in dealing with the issue, adding their bilateral ties will not be disturbed by any other countries. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump said he is open to extending a March 1st deadline to raise tariffs on Chinese products if the two sides are near an agreement. His remarks came as the world's 2 biggest economies are holding talks to resolve their current trade war.
The 10% or 200 billion goes up to 25% on March 1st. And so far, I've said don't do that. Now, if we're close to a deal where we think we can make a real deal and it's going to get done, I could see myself letting that slide for a little while. But generally speaking, I'm not inclined to do that.
U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin are now in Beijing, just days ahead of high-level talks with their Chinese counterparts. A possible shift in the deadline will likely come or be announced after those talks. At least 17 people have died after a fire ripped through a budget hotel in New Delhi, raising fresh questions about India's safety standards. Most of the victims were sleeping when the fire broke out at the Arpit Palace Hotel. An investigation is underway, but the blaze is believed to have been caused by a short circuit. Negligence by safety enforcement officials is also being blamed for the incident.
Thank you as always to our Arirang for the world news there. Now a little closer to home. Despite the South Korean government's efforts to boost the flagging job market, the latest employment report shows the situation remains really grim. The overall unemployment rate for last month was 4.5%, and that's the highest figure for the month of January since 2010. When South Korea and much of the rest of the world was dealing with the aftermath of the 2008 to 2009 global financial crisis. The number of newly employed people in January increased by 19,000 on year, and that's the smallest increase since last August's increase of 3,000. Statistics Korea said the figures decreased in the manufacturing, business facilities management, and wholesale and retail sectors. The South Korean government announced on Tuesday that it's going to increase its investments this year in businesses related to smart factories. These factories use information and communications technology to improve their productivity. According to the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, the government will invest around $304.7 million this year, mainly to build new smart factories or improve existing ones. That's an increase from the previous year's figure of around $118 million. The government wants to use this tech to boost South Korea's manufacturing, a main driver of the country's economic growth. The South Korean government has revealed plans to get tough on firms flouting the rules on the disposal of waste, with dumping taking place here at home and companies packing it up to be dumped in other countries. The government says it intends to completely clean up what it is describing as an disorganized industry within the next few years. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
Earlier this month, a South Korean waste management firm was found to have illegally sent tons of waste to the Philippines for disposal. The extent of the illegal dumping was only discovered when a container was returned to South Korea, still full of waste. Such shady practices are also a growing problem here in South Korea. Experts say a staggering 170,000 tons of waste has been dumped in waterways throughout Gyeongsangbuk-do province alone. The problem isn't limited to one particular province, though, with illegal dumping reported around South Korea. Looking to crack down on the public health issue once and for all, the government has laid out some tough new guidelines.
We will strengthen public management for our waste disposal system as a whole. We'll also expand our plastic waste processing capacity to appropriate levels nationwide and strengthen management control over the private recycling market.
The move comes as the government has become increasingly disillusioned with local companies in the waste processing sector, labeling them ineffective and disorganized, and calling for tighter management oversight for the entire sector. In addition, the government will destroy 20% of the 650,000 tons of illegal waste collected so far by the end of this year, and completely eradicate it by 2022. It plans this month to reveal how much illegal waste has been dumped around the nation and announce specific measures to deal with the issue. South Korea is also pushing to eliminate the use of all disposable cups and plastic straws by 2027 as part of its bid to slash unnecessary waste in the nation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The South Korean government has revealed plans to inject hundreds of billions of dollars into the country's social security system to improve the general state of living here in the nation. Cha Sang-mi outlines what is a 5-year roadmap for us.
The South Korean government has revealed its master plan to lift South Koreans' ranking in terms of quality of life by injecting nearly $300 billion for the nation's social security system. This comes as South Korea has long languished at the bottom among major advanced economies, despite its large economy faring well. The Ministry of Health and Welfare on Tuesday laid out its roadmap to increase the OECD ranking of people's quality of living from 28th in 2017 to 20th by 2023 and the global top 10 by 2040. The 5-year plan covers a range of sectors in society. These are the 4 major ones. In employment and education, the government aims to reduce the proportion of low-income workers from 22% to 15% by 2040 and waive tuition for high school students. This would benefit an estimated 1.5 million people or more. The government will also strive to reduce the poverty rate by strengthening public assistance and income security for working-age people. In the health sector, the aim over the next 20 years is to extend Koreans' healthy lifespan from 73 years to 78 years by strengthening health insurance and reducing medical costs to 1/3 of the current amount. Insurance will be expanded to cover for MRIs and ultrasounds. The government will also nearly double its social spending tailored to the stage of life people are in, and it will also build more national and public nursing and care homes. The plan will cost about $295 billion starting this year with a budget of $48 billion. 차상미, Arirang News.
Now, it's been known for some time now that South Korean students' preferences when it comes to finding a job and which career path they want to take has been changing quite substantially. However, their parents seem to want their children to choose much more traditional career paths, with, in fact, civil service, those in the public sector topping the chart. Our Kim Dami reports and tells us why.
South Korean parents see civil service as the most desirable career for their children. According to a survey published by local job portal Saramin on Monday, civil service has topped the chart for the 2nd year in a row this year. In a survey of 625 workers here in South Korea, around 31% said civil service was their preferred choice for their children's career. It was followed by healthcare, law, business, and education. Such preferences come from the desire for stable jobs over careers that provide other opportunities. In addition, around 66% of parents who want their children to work in the same field as them are civil servants. On the other hand, 62% of all respondents said they're against their children working in the same field, with low salary and high stress the main reasons given. South Korean students' career preferences are changing, with YouTuber making last year's top 10 dream jobs for elementary school students, but parents still seem to prefer traditional jobs for their children. While students have stated passion and confidence in the field as the top reasons to work in their desirable areas, parents said they value their children's interest and job stability. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Good morning. Cold northerly winds blew away the dust from the capital overnight, while the rest of the country is still dealing with polluted air. Meanwhile, the dry weather is getting worse, with a dry weather advisory remaining in place for most areas and the warning being in place for 5 consecutive days here in the capital. And back to the fine dust. Central areas will see improved air quality by the afternoon, while the southern provinces will have to wait until later in the day. So those sensitive to the dust should have a face mask with you. Readings will stay below the seasonal norms for the day, so dress a bit warmer than yesterday. Seoul will only get up to 2 degrees Celsius this afternoon, and plenty of morning sunshine will be joined by a few clouds as the day goes on today. And it's going to be colder tomorrow morning. A nationwide mix of rain and snow is in the forecast for Friday. And we are expecting some temperature fluctuations for the next few days, so be sure to dress accordingly. That's Korea for you, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. Do stay tuned to us on Arirang TV. And a reminder, as always, that our next newscast is coming up at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. So until then, goodbye.